Alright, so I recently finished playing through DK Bananza. Wasn't sure what to expect going into the whole game. I had seen it both ways, people who absolutely love or hate this game. Luckily, I thought it was pretty good. My big concern with the whole destruction concept that they had here that wasn't really resolved until I was a little bit into the game was, I have some OCD with some of these games, admittedly. I have to search every nook and cranny, try to get all the collectibles on my own, and I just thought, well, if you have all these other options to explore through destroying the environment, like I'm gonna get stuck in on these levels forever. Luckily, the game does have a radar function to sort of point you in the right direction and prevent that from happening. Now you just sort of, I guess, chase the shiny thing that's popping up underground. And I guess that's one of the things I do like about this game is with platformers, I guess you kind of do have the ability to reach point A and point B, slightly differently, whether, go in at a different angle or maybe you try with a different ability. But here, when you also add the destruction element, it almost feels Breath of the Wild like, where I feel like so many times in this game, I'd reach a collectible and then I'd look around in the area and see an obvious crack in the wall or a wall that's a slightly different tint. That's where they intended for you to break through to this section at. And I just really like that feeling of, beating some of these sections in unconventional ways compared to, most other platformers. This definitely had a bit more of that. Although, I even struggle to really call this a platformer. To me, this almost feels like if Rampage was still alive, like how I could imagine a modern interpretation of that series. I guess in a way almost going back to Donkey Kong's roots, because obviously George and Rampage and Donkey Kong himself take some, inspiration from King Kong and that whole, would it be kaiju? I'm not really sure on the specific definition of that. If it could be, the big monkey part of that, or if it has to be more of a fantastical, supernatural, Godzilla-esque thing. But another big selling point for this game was the Bananzas. One thing I will critique right here before diving too deep into them is they probably said it and I missed it in a tutorial or something, but I didn't realize until way late in the game that you didn't have to stay in one Bananza. Like, you can activate a Bananza and switch between all 5 of them rather than needing to inactivate and reactivate into a different one. Granted, the game doesn't really force any of that. It wasn't until really late game when there was an occasional occurrence that required that I realized that was even a possibility. Which gets to my minor critique here is I feel like Bananzas could have been a bit better. They sort of show up as a gimmick for the level that they're unlocked in. There's a late level that uses all of them, but it doesn't really do too much with it. It's like they're all in their own little section, and there's pretty obvious clues as to what you should be using where. I guess like maybe the very last, level and some later fights, whether it be challenge or boss, sort of needed a bit more brain power and strategy for using Bananzas. I just wish there was a little more of that sprinkled in throughout the entire game, though. I get not wanting to overwhelm players, but I think, even if they handled the way they did that one world I mentioned where there's obvious hints, so if you unlock this ability, you're clearly going to be using it a lot, and then there's a clear hint at the other ability you're supposed to use with it, I feel like you could have something, kind of some more fun, interesting uses of it, seeing what creative ideas they could have towards using them together. Another thing I didn't like, but it's not a super big deal, I guess, is honestly, I think it would be the art style here. Like, I remember it, and I haven't played it since it came out, but I remember Odyssey was a pretty, good-looking game for Nintendo. This feels worse than I remember Odyssey being. And like I said, maybe they had to downgrade things to really incorporate this destruction mechanic, or maybe it's just the art direction that just isn't meshing with me. Granted, I guess some of the, like cartoony expressions from Donkey Kong could have their own charm, but that's pretty much the only positive thing I have to say about that. I will say the soundtrack started out pretty strong. I think it died down a little bit towards the end, not as good for my tastes. But the first couple worlds or so were pretty much perfect for what I would look for or want. I don't know how you want to say it. Speaking of the first world, it did sort of set an expectation that didn't really follow through. So I thought there was going to be some Banjo-Tooie-esque back and forth between the different layers in each world, which would probably actually work out better than it did in Tooie, since you kind of have quick travel and it's all in one interconnected world. But that was only really a thing in that world, unfortunately. Which, once again, I feel like they could have done some really fun, creative things with that. And there's still some interactivity between the layers, but I feel like that first one was the only one where, you sort of open up the second layer by doing something in the first, and then you open up another part of the first layer by doing something in the second, and so on and so forth, whereas to the rest of them were pretty straightforward. Do something in first, maybe unlock a bit more of the first, or unlock the second, and just keep going from there. I did 100% a majority of bananas. I missed 3 total in the game. There was a couple that required an absolute ridiculous amount of grinding gold to get at the very end, which I was also missing a upgrade or 2 for the same reason. And there was another one where it was like a challenge to break so much of a material in a layer, and I just wasn't hitting it. I don't really know why. I don't know if the expectation was ridiculously high. I don't know if one of the different materials that I thought they were referencing wasn't correct. I think it was the specific challenge in the Radiance layer, but it just wasn't really worth the trouble. And I also skipped out on grinding to get all the discs too. I think I wound up with 3/4 of them. Did get all the fossils as well. I do kind of wish that getting the maps was a little more reasonable. Definitely don't get any of the maps before you beat the main campaign, because you do need a lot of gold to access one of the later areas. And if you have been not saving up, you could be stuck in a position that requires a bit of grinding, which may not be fun. I can see it being a quitting point for some people. But after that, because the price goes up after each map you get, and once again, you can grind and get them for free, but I kind of am, just ready to, see what I missed and make it to the end. I don't want to go around wasting time at that point. So, what wound up working for me is I used Map Genie, just, a guide online for the bananas, which were pretty easy to track in in-game menus. Once again, I should be able to use the maps that are already available. I shouldn't have to go to external sources, but I guess at least there is a way to do it. I just didn't feel like it was fair. And then I just used money to get the fossil maps that were a bit harder to track on the guides I was seeing, without, a clear indication of which ones you're missing in-game, or at least, harder to follow. Costumes are a bit different here, because you actually have different abilities, and that was the one thing I grinded in Odyssey. I remember grinding coins in the one bonus section so I can get all the outfits. There, I'm pretty sure it was cosmetic. Here, you get different abilities for each costume, and then you're wrapped to different fossils for each different world. So it refreshes each time. I thought it was a fine enough system. I think it would have been a little better if you didn't need all of the fossils to unlock absolutely every costume. Except, I don't know, maybe you can have one, special costume at the end if you get everything, but I also kind of wish it had some like Crash Team Racing-esque swap mode, because once again, you might just be using costumes, either one that's inefficient because you want a certain look, or one that's not your preferred appearance, but you want to be efficient with the skills you're using. And I got sort of incentivizing using different outfits in that, but I don't know, maybe that could have been a reward for getting all the fossils, or something you unlock really late game. One other critique, and maybe this is kind of on me, but this was another game that just would not end. Like, I'm okay with, one fake out. It's almost expected at this point. I feel like it happened so much it's kind of lost its luster, but whatever. But then it's like you have a fake out, and then you unlock a whole extra world. And it was, a cool reveal. I had it spoiled, but it was still fun to see it play out. I won't spoil it here for you. And I was okay with that if, the next boss was kind of it, but then there was like a mini boss right after you beat that boss. And even that one, I mean, that's pushing it, but I was fine with it because it was, one of those easy beats that's just kind of almost kind of more cinematic and just sort of like a cool moment-esque tone. But then you do like another mini level at a familiar location, which was cool, but it's like, this is getting ridiculous at this point. And then there's another harder fight against the final boss, which once again, I think that should have just been a reward for getting all the bananas or reaching a certain other milestone. Like, it was just a lot, especially when outside of the aesthetics, the final mini level they had was really nothing special. But man, part of that's probably because it's like, okay, I'm going to beat the game now. Okay, it keeps going. I thought I would be done with this, over an hour ago, and I'm just ready to move on and get to the rest of the collectibles I wanted to wrap up. What they did here with Pauline, I guess, is kind of interesting, just sort of changing the lore a bit between the Donkey Kong and Mario franchise. I don't really know what else to say. It's a Nintendo Mario game, so story isn't the strong suit. And one other thing I want to make note of is I did really like this game. I don't know if it was something only possible on Switch 2. I mean, graphically, no, but maybe mechanically you can make that argument. And I appreciate the studio, trying something new. I think something like that is good. But I also get people's frustration because games are taking so damn long anymore, where it's like, I like this game, it was fun for what it was, but I really liked Mario Odyssey. So whenever they do the next full 3D Mario game or Odyssey 2 or whatever, well, they spent 6 years making this, it's going to take another 6 years to make that. Like, it's going to be ridiculous the way things are going. Personally, I think it's reaching a breaking point, and I think AI will sort of wind up mitigating that, hopefully back to what we used to saw a couple generations ago. But where I liked the game, I can see why people would be extra frustrated with it when it winds up not clicking and not really exactly what you wanted. I mean, I had a similar shift with my perspective on Tears of the Kingdom. Overall, though, I mean, that's the thing, too. If things keep going this long, I mean, after another couple Mario 3D platformers, I might want to see this again. And that'll take forever. But I would recommend, if it seems like from, gameplay and all of that, something worth your alley, do your research. I don't think it's quite at the value if you're a little iffy on it, considering, it's on a newer platform. It's, a $70 game. But if you can wait for hopefully things to get better, for a better, opportunity to pop up with a little bit less of an investment, I would say to go for it.